which is not particularly fair. But, you know, there's only so much money to go around. So, yeah. So interesting process, and it will be challenging. All right. So, Amy, if we can pop that just updated motion on the board. There we are. So that's just to report back to the next council. The next committee meeting, which is in July. Yeah. Cool. All right. Mayor Southgate. Oh, so, well, I'll move that. Would you like to second it? Yep. Okay, so debate.
Thank you. Thank you for your advocacy on that select committee and the really clear report. Just wanted to say a few things on transport that you've talked about concerning to councils up and down the country. And I was in Wellington for a combined sector on Thursday and Friday of last week, and those topics were well canvassed, and there were a couple of political candidates, the deputy chair of the deputy of the National Party and Minister of Local Government made an appearance. They were the sort of questions that the floor was asking, particularly concerning is the sort of either or approach, I guess. You've got resilience and climate, which we all agree is important, and we've got to stand up parts of the country that have been decimated by cyclones in the last year and recently. The other thing is aligning funding appropriately, though, so that you're not just picking certain winners and the more strategic elements of a future-proof transport system are forgotten about. So there's a lot of anxiety around, you know, what's going to happen with the state. In rural and provincial, of course, they're interested in the state of their roading, you know, potholes, all that kind of the maintenance of state highways in their area. For us, it's around growth and being able to provide both in terms of looking after our roads, but also future-proofing. And in terms of, just wanted to make one comment about the Pierere versus Southern Links. The Pierere that they've now funded in the budget, that investigation or design, doesn't mean it's going to be built in the next year or even the year after. That is not yet funded. We shouldn't think a massive safety project like that means that Southern Links never gets a look in, because both projects are important for very different reasons. One's an economic enabler that unlocks potential in a big part of our city. The other one is around freight efficiency, but more importantly, safety. It's a death trap, that particular area. And Hamiltonians, of course, go to Taupo, Rotorua, wherever, and they go on that road. So we have a vested interest in just keeping our eye on the ball with those funding models, Deputy Mayor, so that we can keep advocating for the money to be divested where it most needs to go. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, there are no further speakers, so I'll put that to the vote. Just a show of hands, all those in favour? There are none against, that's carried. All right, item 7, Trade Waste and Wastewater Bylaw. This is the final step in this process of a deliberations report. I don't even know who that is. It's not Ryan. Good morning. We'll hand over to the team.
Morning, Deputy Mayor, Chair and Councillors. For those that don't know me, my name is Kyle Foley, Environmental Policy Analyst for the Three Waters Unit. And to my left is Ray Simpson, Three Waters Policy and Planning Manager. I'd also just like to introduce two others located at the back of the chambers, Ross Reitman, Three Waters Compliance Manager, and Fiona Sutton, Head of Operations and Process. The report presented to the Infrastructure and Transport Committee relates to the review of the Trade Waste and Wastewater Bylaw. Staff are recommending that the draft bylaw is adopted on the 1st of July 2023. I will take the report as read by the committee, however, I do just wish to expand on 2 points. Following a hearing on the 26th of April, there were questions raised by elected members. We have included responses to these as well as responses submitted by the general public within attachment 2 of the report. Secondly, since the report was finalised, we have had feedback on the final draft bylaw from Minister Varel in her capacity as Minister of Health. As noted in paragraph 43, this feedback is required to be sought under legislation. In summary, the Minister has provided support of the bylaw as proposed, noting its continued consistency with the New Zealand model bylaw. That's it for me, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Cole. Are there any questions? Councillor Bitter.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Kyle, could you just expand on point 34 on the mortuary waste and just sort of what the process is there and when it whether it would be left till the next review of the bylaw or just, yeah, tell me about that.
Of course. So as noted in the report, we will be running that separately to this bylaw review. So we have a draft project plan drafted up, just seeking approval on those. We are also meeting with Mana Whenua and also the Funeral Directors Association in the next month to run the process by them to make sure that both of these partners in this process will be happy with how we're approaching this.
Right. So does it come back to us at any point, or like does it get incorporated into the bylaw? Or like
yes, it will just also depend on the outcomes of that review as well. So if the review comes out and says that actually the current management of mortuary waste is appropriate for Hamiltonians, then we can also report that back to the committee as well.
Right, thank you.
There are no further questions? No, good work. That's it. All right.
Sounds easy.
So, look, I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Van Osten. Is there any debate? Councillor Nadiroff.
Just wanted to say it was a really well-written report, very thorough and very detailed. It was covered everything. Thank you.
Good. Great debate. Right, just show of hands, everyone. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. There are none against. It's carried. All right. Item 8, improvements to Wairere Drive and Gordington Road roundabout. Now, just a quick reminder, recap, this came to us, we kicked it to a briefing, remember? We had a briefing, lots of data was available at that briefing. There were lots of questions from elected members. It was really, really good. So now we are here to make a decision on that. So Robin, over to you.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor and councillors, Mayor and Mayor Southgate. So yes, as Deputy Mayor has outlined, we've brought this item previously. This is a project that we had identified through our low cost, low risk program. And sorry, Loredana. Oh, Loredana. Yes. Sorry, Loredana is going to join me this morning, just in case we had any questions on communications and side of things. And so there were some questions asked at that time as to what the impacts of opening the Hamilton section of the Waikato Expressway were going to have on the intersection. That information was reported back in March. And following the workshop, we are now seeking your approval for proceeding with putting in the race safety platforms on 4 of the approaches to the Gordington Wairere intersection. And I'm happy to take questions from there.
Thank you, Robin. Right, questions. I know you have some, or maybe not. I could start if nobody. I always go last. Oh, sorry, Councillor, but I couldn't see you.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Robin, on point 9, it says, it mentions have longer departure ramps. I can't sort of see that on the diagram. Could you sort of explain what's happening to the longer departure ramps?
So the design of our race safety platforms has 2 critical components, depending on the users that we have at that particular location. So the approach ramp and the steepness of that really has a big impact on the speed. Yeah. And then the departure ramp has a big impact, particularly for the larger vehicles, on how comfortable that is. So We've been extending that and making it a lot flatter. And that certainly makes that ride over a lot gentler for those larger vehicles, trucks and that sort of thing. So the Te Rapa Church, for example, intersection has those longer departure ramps.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Van Austin.
The design of the ramp. There's several around Hamilton that if you haven't gone into it straight on, you get this weird bumpy thing happening in your car. How do we make sure that in this instance, because we do want to have a good smooth travelling path, just slowing people down, how do we make sure that that problem doesn't get recreated there?
Yes, so that's making sure that we get the angle at the right angle for the approaching traffic. At the moment, we're only in concept design, but if we get approval today, then we'll proceed for the detailed design. So it's making sure that we follow that through in that process, but also working with the people on site when they go in to build these ramps. They generally do this sort of work at night, so making sure that they've got everything set out in daylight hours and can see exactly what is needed. So the contractors are getting much more experienced at putting this in and have got some good processes now that they're putting in place to make sure that when the guys are working at night, they know exactly what they need to do.
Does that mean that it comes a little bit further back from the curve as you get to the roundabout?
It's more to do with the angle of the ramp as you approach it. So if your vehicle is going to be on a slight angle when you get to the intersection, that needs to be at 90 degrees to your vehicle. So it's just getting that orientation correct.
Perfect. Let the engineers deal with that.
Thank you. Laura Dana's next to you, so I'm going to ask about comms. Do we have a plan around that?
Kia ora koutou. Yes, the team have been working on a communication plan. This is a two-stage process. So we've just completed the guardrail project. And so next will be around the raised safety platforms if this project gets over the line. So the team are working on that. And we're very much going to pivot to a human-centric approach now that we've put a lot of time and effort in kind of telling the story around the purpose of raised safety platforms and the fundamental reason why, which is they save lives. They take a minor crash, they take a crash from being a major crash into a minor crash. So we're going to move now to a human-centric approach.
Okay. And so would that be comms like to the whole city, or like is it on our social media platforms, or is it just a targeted sort of?
So we will definitely have a targeted approach to that particular area. However, people are quite engaged with raised safety platforms across the city. So absolutely there will be some citywide communications with that as well.
Okay, cool. And just one other question. You're right, people are quite engaged. There was a social media post a few days ago, 2 days ago, I think it was, about raised safety platforms, and people complaining about backache, having, going over platforms with a sore back, and it was excruciatingly painful. So you talked about the design of the platforms. Would this one be any different to the other ones, or is that an issue that's been raised before?
It's to do with the speed. So my key advice to anyone driving is that we do have a sign that indicates what a comfortable speed is to go over those raised safety platforms. That's there for a reason, so that you know what a comfortable speed is to go over those platforms. For these ones, because of their location, the fact that we don't have pedestrians crossing at this point, so that we're managing the speeds so that it's a car-on-car impact, that we're trying to minimise any injuries. So there will be a slightly higher speed design, but ultimately there is a comfort speed to go over it, and if it's not comfortable, then slow down a little.
And last question, totally get all the data, all the evidence that you guys have provided. Is this, we're trying to slow down the approach, obviously, into the roundabout. Will there be any other tools or any other signs or flashing lights on the approach to the roundabout I'm just thinking about driving in the dark, foggy nights. Will there be any other safety measures, or is this it? And is this your 100% recommendation?
So we did in February, the traffic panel agreed to lower the speed limit at this intersection. The intention is to put that signage up at the same time as we do this work, because there's efficiencies with the traffic management doing it all in one hit. So we will have that additional signage. And as I said, there will be the sign that indicates that there is a hump and a recommended speed through there. At this stage, we're not planning on doing anything more than that. There's a standard marking on the front of those platforms that's reflectorized as well to help identify it. And we do make the front of our raised safety platforms grey, so they also can be more easily seen than just a straight black one. So those are all the standard sort of things that we include.
Cool. Thank you.
Just a couple of questions. Oh no, so Councillor Casey Cox, you have some? No.
It's a question more so around the comms. I'm interested in, I guess, the young people and the older people in terms of the raised safety platforms and slowing people down. And I guess any particular engagement we're doing with those groups to highlight, I guess, what their perspectives are about slowing drivers down for the in the roundabout. Are we thinking of doing that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So we're working with the transport education team and the school coordinators to get the messaging and the education aspect across to the younger audience, and that seems to be working really well. People are kids are much more kind of willing to take on that kind of safety messaging and the educational messaging. And obviously we're utilising different tactics, like when we do a Your Neighbourhood event, making sure that we are engaging with a range of audiences, and our social tactics also go across different ranges as well. So absolutely.
Yeah, I was probably more meaning what it means to them, to having taught, some young people recently how to drive. I guess I'm just more interested in the story around what it means to them to have slower cars around roundabouts, that sort of thing. That's also part of the...
Well, that's certainly a people-centric approach, making sure that we're tapping into different audiences, telling their stories, getting different opinions, because obviously there's many age groups that have to travel on our network around Hamilton, so making sure that we're telling all of those stories, I think it's really important.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick question from me, just to finish up, that safety is one of the key reasons, and I can see that there is additional signage that's gone up from page 20, that your recommendation is that we put these raised safety platforms in at the beginning of as you enter the roundabout. But should we not approve that today, is there any risk for council if there is an accident of a serious accident? Would we as a council personally or as a committee have any repercussions or be in any way sanctioned or I guess told off for not making this decision at this point?
So I guess the worst case scenario for this is, as you say, that there is a fatal crash and that we end up in coroner's court. And through a coroner's court process, council would be asked a number of questions by the coroner, which we'd have to reply to. And it is likely that they would ask what processes and what thoughts did we know about the risk, what had we done about it. Then it would be up to the coroner to make a decision and recommendations. They can make recommendations back to council on changes. I guess at the end of the day they can't 100% direct, but that would be the worst case scenario as far as I'm concerned, is having to front a coroner's court and explain the process that we've gone through and perhaps some measures that we didn't take that could have made a difference to the outcome of that event.
Okay, and that could adversely affect us publicly.
Yes, it's a reputational concern. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. This is the option of putting in raised safety platforms is 1.6 million, being far lower than the other options of between 8 and 15 million upwards. So before we had the option of using raised safety platforms to slow traffic down, what options would we have had?
So that's, I guess, the sort of options that we have tried to employ via the additional signage that we've put in place. The design of that roundabout, we could have looked at whether we were going to rebuild the approaches and try and get people to slow by creating some more deflection. So it wouldn't have been a cheap or easy solution to have really addressed this problem. We probably would have just kept throwing signs at it.
And so in the report, it says that then we often work on this, don't we, when we're evaluating what measures to put in place, the 85th percentile, which is, there's a real equation around that, which I won't try and explain. But it came out as the speed on approach for the majority of drivers is between 32 and 45 kilometres an hour. And this is in a current 60 zone. We've changed it to 50. So that suggests that most drivers are approaching with the appropriate speed and due care. And yet the flip side of that are 25 cars have hit the centre barriers. And we know that should a car hit it with enough force to go over, there are pedestrians and cyclists underneath, and that would absolutely make the front page of any newspaper in the country. So what's going on with those 25 cars, given the majority of people and the severity of those, you know, the damage that's occurring and the speed that it says in the report that 2 of those crashes, those cars were going at greater than 100 kilometres an hour. What's happening there?
So I guess there's 2 types of parties that get involved with crashes. There are some that are out there doing illegal activities knowingly, and I think there's plenty of media coverage on those sort of activities. For some people, it is a challenge or to see how quickly you can get around the network. But a lot of those people, it will be just a genuine mistake. It will be because it's a new situation, new intersection for them. They haven't come through there before. They haven't picked up enough other signals that there's an intersection or that they need to slow down as much as they do. Or it may be somebody that's actually quite familiar with it and just really isn't concentrating. It's that autopilot, you drive it regularly. And you're not really focusing on the task of driving. You might be thinking about what you're going to cook for tea, or am I going to get to kids in time to pick them up from school, or all these other things that we do a whole lot of things that while we're out driving that aren't focused on the driving task. So there are, and in most situations you find the majority of your crashes are people who've made genuine mistakes. The point of this work is to try and help people, if they do make a mistake, is not suffer fatal consequences or serious consequences. And it's not only people potentially ending up in that central area. We've literally just finished some work improving those central barriers, but we have people crashing within the intersection itself. And those speeds, even around 50, that side-on impact is sufficient for somebody to be hurt. Seriously hurt. So it's trying to provide an environment such that your autopilot and all those things that you do without necessarily thinking about are getting enough signals to get you down to the right speed and choose the right gaps.
And final question, is this 71 crashes for such a new intersection, is that on the high side?
It is a high number. It has a high number of vehicles going through it. So it's relative, we've got in the order of 33,000 vehicles moving in and around that intersection on a daily basis. And we do know that roundabouts do tend to have probably slightly more crashes than traffic signals, for example. But we want to try and make sure that those crashes that occur are just fender benders and people are able to walk away, drive around the corner and have their discussion without any difficulties, not creating major congestion at the intersection. But it is still high, and that's why this site was chosen and the work we did with Waka Kotahi and pulling together that Road to Zero program.
Okay. Councillor Naidoo-Roll?
One follow-up from Chair Angela. What actually happens if a car is travelling at 100 k's an hour and there's a race safety platform? What actually happens? Like, in my mind, it's, airborne. So does it actually stop or?
So jerks of hazard is not what we see. So we've had good experience with our Gordonton Thomas intersection where we did have a few people who liked to go through that site quite quickly. That was, the Gordonton Thomas was one of the really early ones. That's where we did a lot of learning. And that was one of the genuine concerns that we had. But the vehicles actually were able to carry on quite nicely. The brake lights went on because we happened to have somebody who regularly did it about 1 o'clock in the morning. The brake lights went on fairly quickly and they settled down after that. But yes, so we're not worried about the Dukes Hazard bolting into the central roundabouts. Thank you.
So does the car not become airborne if it does hit it?
No, your suspension is sufficient. And that's where that design is really important, and the speed environment that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So this one is designed to be taken at higher speeds.
So in the event that the raised safety platforms go in, the good people of Hamilton who continue to drive at 32 to 45 kilometres on approach continue to do that. But there are still those people that will take to the streets at 1 a.m. in the morning and hit one of these at 100 k.